subscribe.
Hi everyone and welcome. My name's Alison, the online piano and the online violin tutor. Today is a top 10 most common violin mistakes video. Again, I'm getting a lot of questions from you guys asking about, one thing or another. So I thought I would just put it all together in a video. And not only that, I think I would just kind of, a lot of you are complete beginners out there, obviously because this is what these videos are aimed at, but a lot of you are self-teaching. So you're either looking at my videos or other sources on the internet, other videos, and reading this, that and the other over the internet and things. And maybe you don't have the guidance of a teacher or anybody like that. So what this video is aimed to do is to really give you the top 10 most common violin mistakes. So things that I see all the time that students do, things that I've done as well when I was starting out in my violin career. So, I'm kind of I'm not immune to those sorts of things either. So these are the things that I think you should sort of look out for. These aren't in any particular order at all. These are just kind of the top 10 most common violin mistakes that I've sort of come across in my many years of teachings and things. So, okay, number one I've got here, holding the violin down or holding the violin not in the right place. I've done a video on using shoulder rests or not. Again, I'm gonna say it again, it doesn't really matter whether you use a shoulder rest or not. Some of the top professionals do, some of the top professionals don't. It really, really does not matter. It doesn't change anything at all. I choose not to have one, and that's just my personal preference. However, a shoulder rest can help you keep the violin in the right place. So I find that if I've got students that are sort of creeping the violin down towards them, so what the students tend to do is have the violin angled down to the front, and then it's down really low, and they end up sort of playing to all the ants and creepy crawlies on the floor and things like that. So when I've got a kind of extreme case with a student, I will get them to put a shoulder rest on the violin, and it immediately puts it does put it in the right place. So you don't have a choice with a shoulder rest to play down there, because that's just too uncomfortable, and your head's going to be in the wrong position and everything. So the shoulder rest will make you put the violin on the side on your shoulder. So number one, holding the violin down. You must make sure that it is in the right position, because it's going to alter the angle of the bow and everything. Moving on to number two, bow hold. There are many different types of, or there are a few different types of bow holds. This is just one of the bow holds that I choose to do. I have done videos on bow holds as well, so I'm not going to kind of go into all of that stuff about that. So this is the bow hold that I choose to use. A lot of people end up kind of with the bow slipping in different situations, or the thumb actually should be bent here. A lot of people end up with the thumb not being bent, with the thumb sort of being, the thumb being arched, and the thumb should actually be bent when it's holding the bow. So bow hold. The bow hold is probably more important than actually where you hold the violin. I won't let a student move on to do anything, not even put the bow on the strings, until I'm happy with the bow hold. 9 times out of 10, or 99% of the time, that does actually, it does actually work. If I tell a student to go away and practice the bow hold, the following week they've done it. It only takes sort of a good week of practice to get the bow hold. But it's so important. The sound comes from the bow. The sound does not come from the fingers. The fingers give you the names of the notes, A, B, C, D, but the sound actually comes from the bow. So if you're not holding the bow correctly, then later on down the line you'll say, oh, why isn't it so smooth? Why can't I get it to sound like this? Why can't it sound like that? And it's generally going to be because of the bow hold isn't correct, so you're not going to be able to get the flexibility in the fingers the right way. You're not going to be able to do some of the technical exercises and some of the technical things that you can do with a bow, because of your bow grip not being correct. Number three, intonation, or if you don't know what intonation is, it's basically having your fingers or having the notes in tune on the violin. So intonation is just a way for us to say on the violin that your fingers aren't dead in the place where they need to be. So there is only one place that the third finger needs to be at any one time, and if it's just a millimetre or even a fraction of a fraction of a fraction out of where it needs to be, it's not going to sound in tune. So unlike the piano, where you have the notes directly in front of you, and if you want to play a C, you hit a C. If you want to play a D, you hit a D. It doesn't even have fret. The guitar at least does have frets. The violin doesn't have anything. So that is one of the hard parts of the violin, and it is something that You know, the intonation to start with sometimes isn't very good, but it is something that you can progress on as long as you're listening, as long as you're aware of your fingers not being in tune. And it is easier said than done. It is a lot easier for somebody on the outside listening to you to criticise and say that your intonation isn't perfect. And sometimes as players, I know it sounds really weird, but we don't always hear our own playing. Obviously we've got ears, obviously we can hear ourselves play, but I think it's a case of we're thinking about too many other things. We're looking at the music, we're trying to get the bowing, we're trying to get the fingers in place, we're holding the violin, we're trying to do vibrato, we're shifting position, we're doing all sorts of things, and sometimes we ourselves as players don't really listen. And again, that's something that you learn as time goes on, but I mean, recording yourself obviously solves that situation. So putting your fingers in the wrong place, that's another common thing that I always see students doing. Bow on the strings position. So what I mean by that is where the bow actually needs to be on the strings. So the bow and the violin should make sort of a cross shape. The bow shouldn't be sort of wonky or on the side or anything, and the bow, you should be bowing more or less in the middle between the bridge and the fingerboard. So not too much on the fingerboard, not too sort of close to the bridge, but more or less, I'd say roughly sort of in the middle. That's where you're going to get the nicest and the most consistent tone there. So you want to be bowing nice and straight. Again, I've done videos on all of these, and that's just to do with the angle of the arm and everything moving from the elbow to the wrist, and not from the shoulder to the elbow. We never sort of bow with our shoulder, we're always bowing sort of from the elbow. So I see a lot of students sawing wood, if you like, where we're getting this sort of action. So that's where you must keep the top part of your arm straight, and you're just bowing from the elbow. That way you're going to keep the bow position on the string nice and straight. Number 5, not practicing enough. It sounds really obvious, but students just don't practice enough. Of course, we all know what happens if you practice. We all know what happens if you don't practice. So obviously, if you practice, you get better. If you don't practice, you don't get better. And sometimes it's very difficult, or sometimes you get caught in a catch-22 situation where you're not very good at something, so you don't want to go and practice, but because you're not practicing, you're not very good at it. And because you're not very good at it, you don't want to practice. And because you don't practice, you're not very... So it goes around in a circle. However, you can flip that to the positive, and if you do practice, you get better. The better you get, the more you want to practice. The more you practice, the better you get, and so that goes around in a good cycle. So not practicing enough, basically. Okay, number 6, practicing too fast. So many students practice at the speed of light. So many students practice they're starting off pieces that they've never seen before, so they've just started opened up a book, just started a new piece, and I don't know what it is. I suppose I was a culprit of doing this when I was younger. It's human nature, isn't it? But everybody wants to play the piece at the final speed you're going to be playing if you were playing it for an exam, or if you're going to be playing it in front of people. So practicing too fast, you must do really slow practice. I know it's really laborious, and I know it's really boring, but slow practice can work absolute wonders. Trust me, try it, especially when you get to more advanced stages and you're more proficient with a piece. And let's just say you reach kind of a brick wall with a piece of music, when you've got it down, you've got the basics, yeah, it's sounding okay, but there's something, you're missing that kind of je ne sais quoi, you're missing that kind of certain something about it, and you need to take it to the next level. Well, try a little bit of really, really super duper slow practice for a week, and then after that week, go back to doing it to the normal full speed that you were playing it at, and trust me, I promise you, it will be 1,000,000 times better than it was before. So you'll have crossed that boundary, and you will take the piece to the next level, and then you'll suddenly get new ideas of where to take the piece from. Number 7, thinking that you're not being good enough, or thinking that you're not very good, and giving up. So students are, oh, it's too hard, oh, I can't do it, oh, I don't, what can I say to that one, really? You need to, if nobody did anything then, or if nobody practiced, or if nobody wanted to do anything, then we wouldn't do anything. So a lot of the time I see students kind of with a negative attitude, oh, I can't do it, it's too hard, Of course you can do it. I believe anybody can do anything. I believe that, a grade 1, grade 2 could even play grade 8 music. by the time you get to grade 1, grade 2, you've learnt all the notes and you've learnt the music, and you're obviously going in for exams and you're passing the exams and things. There's no difference really between grade 1 and grade 8, except that grade 8 has more complicated rhythms, a few more notes in the bar than the grade 1 and grade 2. But the notes don't get any harder as such. They're still the same notes that you get in grade 1 and 2. It's just there's perhaps just a lot more of them. So, you know, in theory, anybody can do anything, even if you're at an early grade. When I was younger and I was kind of on grades, I don't know, 3 and 4 on the piano, I'd be playing diploma music just because, you know, I heard it on the radio, or I heard my teacher playing it, or I heard it here, I heard it there, and I just wanted to play it. So I kind of plough through it, plug my way through it, until eventually, you know, I got it up to a good standard. I wasn't brilliant at it because I hadn't learned all the technical aspects and had the kind of expressive maturity, and because I was so young. But, you know, I could play the notes and I could play the piece, and then I just had to sort of wait for myself to kind of catch up to that stage before I could make the best out of it. So yeah, don't think you're never good enough at anything. It all goes back to practicing, really. The more you practice, the better you'll get. Number 8, and this is probably, it's probably number 1, and it's my massive bugbear in any instrument, and it is ignoring blatant mistakes and moving on. Please don't ignore mistakes. If you've made a mistake, depends sort of how big the mistake is, but if you've made a mistake, go back and sort it out. So many students in the lessons kind of just play through them. They've made a mistake, they know full well they've made a mistake, and they've carried on anyway. I always say, if you're in an exam or if you're in a concert situation, then yes, you should move on, but not when you're learning something, not in the early stages, because 1, you'll start to play the mistake, and 2, you'll start to think that the mistake is actually not a mistake and it's actually part of the music. So, you know, there's a difference, perhaps an exception to the rule, but when you're playing a piece of music, go through the whole piece of music. And obviously you're going to have made mistakes, but it's nice just to get the whole flavour of the music first, and then go back and sort mistakes out. Then when you get a little bit more proficient, say, and you're still making the same mistake, you need to go back and isolate that bar and play it again and 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 again until you never make that mistake. And if it means you've got to play it 150 times, you're going to have to play it 150 times until you never make that mistake. And that's the discipline with that. Number 9, not having any rosin on the bow. You would actually be surprised how many people don't rosin the bow, especially, again, I've done a video on this, so you can search for that on my channel, it's easy to find. So many kids don't just put enough rosin on the bow, and some adults as well, but I'd say probably more kids. It's not something that you sort of remember to do. So every time they come to the lesson, they do poke a little bit of rosin on the bow and things. When you need to rosin pretty much just depends on how much you practice, but if you're practicing every day for a good while, then probably once a week, and probably just a couple of little shimmies up the bow, and that's it. Any more, you're just going to overdo it. If you're sort of practicing every other day, then you probably need to rosin the bow once every 2 weeks, and again, a couple of little shimmies and you're done. Make sure you rosin right at the end of the bow, and make sure you rosin right at the heel of the bow as well, so that you've got enough there and you're not just kind of doing it really flimsily and just kind of doing it in the middle there. So not having enough rosin on the bow, it's really not good, because you're not going to get any sound out of it. Part of the bow is going to get a sound and the other part's not. So make sure you've got some rosin on the bow. And number 10, not tuning the violin. I understand if you're beginners and if you're kids and things, again, it's not probably something that you'd be able to do, and I do tend to tune, obviously, my students' violins when they come to the lesson, because they can't do it themselves. But of course, if you're in a home situation, or you're self-teaching, you don't have a teacher to tune your violin. So please do make sure that you tune your violin. Again, I've done a video on this, I think 8 different ways to tune your violin, I think the video is called. And you know, you've got these little apps that you can have on your phone now, so you play the string and you play it to your phone, and the needle will tell you, the needle should be in the middle most of the time, and the needle will tell you how far. If the needle's too far over to the right, then you're going to be too sharp. If it's too far to the left, then you're going to be too flat. So you need to use your fine tuners here to tune it up, or the pegs. Be careful if you do use the pegs though, but do make sure your do make sure your violin is in tune. And it's so important, because it's gonna alter where you put your fingers. If your A string, for example, is really sharp, sometimes I've been playing in concerts and performances where my strings have gone out of tune, or one of my strings, and I've had to compensate accordingly. So it's really hard work to do, and it's really hard to get your brain around. But if my A string is too sharp, and obviously I'm playing something with the piano, then it's a nightmare, because all of the rest of my fingers on that string have to play sharp enough. However sharp my A string is from where it needs to be is how much I need to move my fingers up, or move them down, or wherever it is I need to move them, depending on whether the string is too sharp or too flat or whatever. So you're going to have to compensate, and that means you're going out of where the fingers need to go. So you've just gone through all the pain and effort of learning where your fingers need to be, and then all of a sudden it's moving on a daily basis. So do make sure your violin is in as close to being in tune as possible, because it will knock your fingers out. So that was a quick video for you. I know there's been a lot of talking in there and not much playing today, but I really hope that has kind of helped you. They are the top 10, there are others as well, but they are a few others, but they are the top 10 most common violin mistakes that I see people making. So hopefully you guys can bear all of those things in mind. So when you're teaching yourself and you're playing around and all that kind of thing, that you can bear those things in mind and try not to make those mistakes, and in turn make you a better violinist. So thanks very much for watching. Please subscribe to my channel if you like my videos, and I'll see you all next time.
Subscribe.